Good morning, everybody. My name is Grant Swartzwelder I'm president of OTA Compression, OTA Environmental, and welcome to our 11th version of Oilfield Strong webinar. We're fortunate to have the Permian Basin Petroleum Association as our co-sponsor, and welcome all the members of PBPA along with the friends of OTA and the industry. As you know, we've set this up as a way to just help educate and keep people in touch. We've had a variety of topics. Most recently, as you know, last Wednesday, we had Railroad Commissioner Christy Craddock. We have a great speaker today I'll introduce. And then coming forward, we have the TCEQ administrator. We also have Congressman Mike Conway. And we also have EPA District 6 Administrator Ken McQueen. So we've got, I think, a fantastic slate of folks that we've got coming up. If you've missed any of them, you can go on our YouTube channel and listen to any of that. We record each of these for later viewing if you'd like. But with that, I'm especially happy today to have Stephen McNair, longtime friend, but more importantly, because of our topic being the water industry within the E&P sector, I don't think we could ask for anyone better to visit with us on that. As president of Pioneer's Water Management Company and very involved with Pioneer's water efforts, which was, I think, one of the cutting edge efforts in the water side. He then went over to H2O Midstream and was EVP of corporate development and of operations. So as far as understanding the water industry, I just don't think there's many out there that would know as much as Stephen. So, and he did not pay me to say any of that. So just happy to speak fact on that. So Stephen, welcome. Let's just start off with kind of the softball question of, obviously COVID, low prices has rocked the world. How has it changed the water industry?
Well, I think probably the first and foremost obvious impact would be on the drilling reductions and therefore the completions reductions. So the demand for source water, as we call it, for fracking is dropped. We'll see the rig count significantly. So those in the water business, primarily focused on supplying source water for fracs, probably saw a lot more of an instant impact. Those involved with the part of the water midstream segment of gathering produced water and then handling it, either disposal or setting up reuse or recycle operations, they have a little more of a less of a disruption, and their pain is going to be felt. The natural declines when you end drilling on that side of it. So those type companies that are primarily focused on gathering produced water and disposing are seeing a decline, of course, and trying to maximize their revenue with what they have as they see the revenue going down, but also watching their operating expenses and certainly trying to survive this downturn for sure. Those specializing in recycling and reuse, probably in the same category as the source water folks for fracking, that they've seen the demand just almost go away overnight. So it's been tough.
You kind of describe both sides, kind of the source water coming in, but then also, well, I guess the recycling, which is kind of in between, and then you've got the disposal side also. It's I would even assume the disposal side's being affected just as they shut wells in and reduce the production.
Yeah.
So is there one of those that's better to be in than not?
Well, if drilling stops, that's your pretty much your sole source of revenue. If you're supplying water for drilling and completions, primarily completions operations. If you're gathering produced water, you in most cases you've got long-term contracts. You've got a pipeline laid to that site. And you're just going to feel a slow decline as these wells decline, and the declines are not being replaced with new volume. I think what really hit hard for really just about 4 to 6 weeks was when producers actually shut in existing production. Then if you were a gatherer, it was a lot more than a decline. It was a valve shutting off. Now that was very short-lived. At this price environment, at least in the Permian, pretty much all the production's back online.
Do the various contracts for either side of that, are those take or pay, or is it just simply if it flows, you get paid, but if it doesn't, then you don't get paid?
Yeah, just like the natural gas, I cut my teeth, or most of my career was on the gas midstream side. You'd like to, as a infrastructure guy, a midstream guy, try to get some kind of volume commitment. Usually in the oil patch, that's very difficult to do. It's competitive. The producers expect you to take more capital risk. And what really the industry's settled on and has been doing for many years is what we call an acreage dedication, where you are sharing some drilling risk with that producer, your customer, in that if they quit drilling, they're not obligated to give you water. But if they drill in an area, we call it an acreage dedication, they are committed that any development in that area for a certain term, that water does go to you for a predetermined fee. So that's really most cases the way the industry's fallen out. Now, are there some outliers where maybe it was a pretty good capital investment to go get a very distant well pad? There might be some permutations where there's a little bit of capital protection offered by the producer, but by and large, most of the deals out there are acreage dedications. The midstream water company, if you will, takes that capital risk, but they've got a commitment that any volume goes to them.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. It seems as if private equity is really driven, or available capital from private equity has really driven this industry and allowed for a lot of acquisitions and organic growth to be done. I would think that the amount of capital that's willing to come into the water industry or the E&P oil-related industry has shrunk quite a bit. Is that true? And if so, then what does that do to these water companies' ability to grow?
Yeah, I would say probably from 2017 till pre-COVID, the water midstream business was kind of the darlings. I call it an emerging business. Yes, we've had disposal wells operated by third parties for quite a while. A lot of them were those roadside truck unloading type operations. But the midstream model being used for water akin to crude oil gathering and gas gathering really is an emerging business. So with any kind of emerging business, you're trying to, figure out the bar ditches. What's a fair fee to charge? What's attractive to the operator? What kind of services you're going to have? What kind of quality and standards and specs? Our industry, as an emerging industry, has been working through that for the last 2 to 3 years. And there's been some painful, instances, and there's been some good stories. But being an emerging business and a lot of promise, back to your question, a lot of money has been thrown into the industry. Unfortunately, we're impacted really just about as much as anybody else in the oil and gas industry because of our dependence on drilling. And it's very tight right now. Things are slow, and everybody, with the uncertainty of the virus and the downward pressure on demand and the resulting prices, has really made it very tight for money. Excuse me.
And all these private equity folks are definitely kind of pausing, but do you think, as it relates to the capital for the water industry, do you think it's a pause, or do you think it could be a drifting away from that as an opportunity?
Well, I think it's a pause. A lot of the, excuse me for a second, just a sec. It's definitely a pause. I really feel that well, I sound like I'm getting the flu or something, but
I didn't realize I was asking you such hard questions.
Yeah, I know. No, it's a pause. I really feel like the whole market is going to shift. There are some risks in the business, like any new business that you discover and learn about. And I really believe some of the fees that have been negotiated are, I'll say, very skinny for the margin side, given the risk that you're assuming.
Well, now that's, it seems like you're saying that with regards to the water companies, but you go over on the E&P side, you've got potential bankruptcies, you've got things that could really realign those pricing. Does that kind of fit into what you're talking about?
It does. I mean, certainly everybody's watching operating expenses and margin, but like I said, the risk, when you undertake a water midstream business, there's some variables that have shifted from, say, the traditional producer gathering and disposing water. And the big one to me is the asset utilization. That your typical operator might have 30% load on his SWD. You start loading up that system to 70, 80%, because as a midstream company, you want to have multiple customers. You want to drive down unit cost. And the operations, I think someone's bringing me some water. Oh, thanks, man. Oops. Oh. Someone rescued me there.
There you go.
I apologize, everybody. It's a little warm in here. It's Grant's questions. But when you look at the downhole risk of fully loading up SWDs, when you look at the quality, you look at operators that traditionally have their own systems, they use that disposal system as literally like a garbage disposal. And as a midstream company, now you have a demarcation of that custody. And how do you deal with that? And it's not a perfect system, where sometimes they'll give you a bunch of solids in the line. So I think there's some operating risks that you assume as a water midstream. And how do you price that? And how do you value that? And how does the operator value that? So we've had discussions with our customers, what's this kind of service worth? Is it worth an extra 2 or 3, 4 cents a barrel versus my competitor? And so all of that is being learned, developed, experienced in the industry. But certainly back to your question, Grant, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a challenge, and those that can be efficient, keep their systems loaded, put in the right processes and systems from maintenance and reliability, and earning that trust from the operators. We have a little saying there that you can't flare water. And there's still some operators, just like the evolution of the gas midstream business, that are going to take longer for them to hand over that control. Now, back to what you're saying, is they need money. There's a funding source there if they sell their water system.
Well, and I think that's what a lot of the oil companies have been doing, is selling to gain liquidity or capital for their drilling program. But you see that continuing, or it would seem like at least the price point is going to have to adjust.
I really do, and we were looking at some deals at the very end of the year, and with any big change in a market, that buy-sell spread probably starts out pretty wide, that the operators are still believing their assets are worth X. And given the change in the business environment, not only the pricing, but the risk of receiving those volumes, do you change contract structures? Do you wait for the ask-buy spread to contract where deals can be made? All those kind of questions, I think, are really kind of stewing around. We believe we're bringing a very value-added service to the producer. Again, we have to earn that trust that they can hand the keys of the car over to a company like us to responsibly and reliably relieve them of their water, so to speak, and make sure it's taken well care of to provide for them. So no, I'm optimistic that when we come out of this, Grant, is we prove ourselves, continue to prove ourselves, and then the operators have a lot of pressure on them to raise funds, besides just asking a private equity or investor, that's a great opportunity for them. But, you know, back to that emerging business, we're really cheering for everybody to do well, because if one water midstream company goofs up and does not provide good service, the operators notice that, and they'll be more reluctant to let go of it.
Well, not only does the oil company notice that, the whole public does. It's a very, and we'll talk about environmental in just a little bit, but talk about, you know, when I think of water, I think of taking it out of the ground, and then, yeah, you recycle some of it, but then a lot of it just gets disposed. You know, what is the effort, or what do you see the effort and the trend being for cleaning that water to be able to reuse in some kind of better use than just disposing it?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question, and I think it's swirling around. And, you know, like you said, you alluded to the ESG push that we'll talk about here a little bit later. Yeah, it's you know, if you talk to the macro people, and, you know, I went to the Baker Institute one time for a think tank session, and they're saying, you know, here's all this water that we're just putting in the ground, and how much of it will ever be used again? Let's keep it in the environment, let it evaporate it, let it come back as rain, and, you know, kind of keep it in the ecosystem, so to speak. We all know that typically the driver is financial. We all have to make a profit, and we're going to make most of our decisions based on profit. And, you know, sometimes it's mostly short term. Sometimes we get a little bit longer term. Certainly the ESG pressure is real. Investors are demanding that companies have that ESG focus and put that into their business plan and actually execute on it, not just talk to it. I have to applaud. One reason my former company, we stayed away from proprietary treating is it's almost like the computer industry, you know, in the late 80s and early 90s, that, you know, your PC became antique within 18 months because it was improving so quickly. I have to applaud our technical treating people in the industry that, you know, they started out $2 a barrel to give you, you know, basically fresh water distilled. And then on the other side, our completions folks needed fresh water, and they were doing these fancy hybrid gel fracs. And now we're mostly slick water, and we're mostly, and that can tolerate salinity, you know, salt, basically the salt water with minimal treatment. So we've probably gone from $2 to $3 a barrel for an acceptable frac water to the 20-cent range. And that's been really revolutionary to support recycling and reuse. And then you look at the cost savings of disposing and all that's involved in that we really are right there, probably where we need to be, where recycling and reuse with a little bit of ESG pressure. A lot of the operators now are fully embracing recycling, and some of the bigger ones are recycling up to 50% of their produced water. We'd love to get it higher. There's always going to be some geographical challenges and where is the right amount of water in the right place at the right time. But it's really moved very well, and most folks are on board with it.
So the reduction in price or the improvement of economics isn't necessarily associated with the cleaning the water. It's just more about recycling it. And it sounds like maybe you clean it some, but you don't have to do it near as much, because then you're able to just change your chemicals and your completion techniques to use that dirtier water.
That's exactly right. That both sides did a remarkable job, and, you know, you'd like to think you kind of do it on your own, but when the prices, you know, fell in 2015, 2016, out of necessity, the drillers, or the frac crews, if you will, they moved quite a bit and taken the nastier water, or less clean water, I should say. And then you're able, with minimal treatment, get to the spec that they were able to make use. So it was a really good collaborative effort that got us to where we are in really short order. I mean, I tell stories in 2014. I'd get a call from a guy in Pennsylvania, and he'd say, "I've got some water. I'll railroad to you for $2 a barrel." And I said, "Well, you know, you're not going to touch anything in the Permian Basin or get anybody's attention, because at that time water was cheaper." But now that we've got the recycling costs coming down so much, and the fracking industry able to take, quote, less minimally treated water, that convergence is really in a good spot right now. Now we need to work on the pipeline side, and like I said, the logistical side, and that's what water midstream really is the logistics of getting the right amount of water at the right quality at the right time to that customer. And that's a bigger challenge than you think when you're looking at 8 well pads and you got a lot of water here for a short amount of time, and then it declines and you need a lot of water over here. So that's where the midstream business really can contribute and add a lot of value because you have multiple customers at various stages of their program, and you can aggregate water both on a gathering, disposal, and then of course treating and redelivery.
And some of the words you use, like logistics and footprint, really make it seem like this is really works for the larger companies, the ones that have a bunch of production, a bunch of drilling, and then they can shift it around. Is there a place for the smaller E&P companies for all this, or is it just, it seems like most of the deals that I've been seeing for water companies have been large E&P companies doing a bunch of acreage. But what about all these small, independent, smaller players? Is it just doesn't fit, or is there an opportunity there?
No, that's probably the biggest contribution and the best market, if you will, for water midstream. Because just like gas and crude oil, we're aggregators, and you know, we buy a system, and hopefully, pretty quickly, you can have 5 or 6 customers on the system. And whereas the smaller guys, they don't have the scale, as you mentioned, to build their own water systems and enjoy the benefits of lower unit cost, higher capital efficiency, and then of course the ability to aggregate enough water to supply a 600,000 barrel frac times 8 wells. You know, it's close to 5 million barrels. Now, with that said, we also think a good market to serve is the big guys. And of course, they're driven more by control, and they've got a healthier balance sheet, and they can spend a lot of capital. The benefit for them is they end up with what we call a lot of white space. You know, they build a system. You know, it's I get teased sometimes by my coworkers because I throw out some what do you call them, analogies, but you know, you don't build a church for Easter Sunday. And that's what the big operators do. They have to build the church or their system for peak volumes, and the other 330 days of the year, that system is way underutilized. And that's what we offer to the larger operators is, you know, we want to serve you. We want to give you good service. You can trust us, but we can add a second, third, and a fourth operator on this system. And of course, their first response is, you know, that's going to hurt me because you're serving someone else on my system that I want 100% of my water in. And we say, no, it can actually help you, because if you look at efficiencies and shared costs, and then also some of producer B's volume might contribute to your producer A's frac. So when you have a large system, you can build redundancy in more effectively. You've got scale, you can move water around. So we feel like we can add just as much volume, Grant, to a large operator as a small operator.
Okay. Explain, when you have water coming from operator A and then water from operator B, 2 things that come to mind: liability associated with all that water. And I assume you, the midstream company, are accepting that. And so you don't care where you're getting the water. And then second is different types of water, different attributes. What does that do for the final use and being able to treat it appropriately?
That's a very good question. It comes up, and there's certain learnings going on, as we speak. But to answer your first question or comment about liability, I can't remember the name of the order, but the Railroad Commission has now passed a rule that liability does shift to a third-party midstream type service provider. We have it in our contracts, and we believe that's one of the services we add is you give us your water and you don't need to worry about it. We have title and custody of it, and not just custody of it. And but we all know, those of us that grew up in the 80s and 90s, and this came up a few years ago. You go to an Exxon, you go to a company that's got very, very deep pockets. They kind of look at you like, yeah, that all sounds good, but they're going to come after me. So there's probably going to have to be some test cases on that. But right now, at least in the state of Texas with the Railroad Commission, the liability does go to the midstream provider, and that seems to be working well. Your second question is quality, merging water streams, and this is a constant challenge in the midstream business. I had it in Wyoming in the early aughts about a water spec and who was violating the water spec. And of course, the two producers point to each other, point to the other guy, and you have to play a little bit of police and find out who the culprit is. But our industry is still really, we don't have a standards and specs book like the natural gas or crude oil industry has, that everybody says, oh yeah, you need to be at this water content, this nitrogen content. It's still moving around in the water business. What's a fair spec? Because the original systems were producer owned, so they were just putting the water into their own pipeline, their own SWD. Nobody was merging. So I can't fully answer your question. We are taking on some commingling risk as far as maybe some solids drop out and things like that. But we're getting really good at, when we redeliver that water to the producer, we've got a spec that meets their frac criteria. Now, if you end up being a boutique business where everybody's got their own frac formula for water, that can get pretty pricey. So I think, just like the other industries, this thing's going to evolve over the next several years. There's already been talk about some of the major players getting together and coming up with some standard specs that make sense. They're not onerous to the operator, but yet they're reasonable to the midstream company receiving the water, that they can run their business profitably and reliably. So that's yet to be determined or fleshed out.
Okay. Well, we're almost out of time. I apologize. I didn't mention, if any attendee has a question, please include that in the chat, and I'll try to include it real quick. I apologize I didn't bring that to your attention earlier. But let's finish with a bang and talk about ESG. We kind of alluded to that with liability and the such. Oil price, everything's kind of slow, so it seems like ESG is not as discussed. But I would think, especially in the water world, there's nothing more visually or more scary than, some type of a spill, especially a brine type spill, and it being flashed on the newspaper, and I bet you could get everyone on you. So how do you see ESG, especially the E part of that, affecting the industry from a regulatory, from a public relations standpoint?
Yeah, and let me just, before I answer that, I'll put in a quick plug, Grant, if I could, for UTPB. Grant and I are both on the advisory board of the College of Engineering. There's a very well-attended conference that I'm on the inaugural board on. We've had 3 years now. It's called the PBWIEC. I can't believe I said that right, but Permian Basin Water and Energy Conference. It's held in late February. Some changes have been made in the last few months, that the conference is going to be handed over to UTPB. So we'll be working on that. But there's a lot of energy right now for water. Dean Nana is the dean of the College of Engineering. He came down to UTPB from Purdue University. He holds all kinds of distinctions in water and water treatment. And it was no accident that he was brought down to UTPB with his specialty in water. So there's a great resource there. They're looking for projects to do in water, and a couple of companies have engaged these college students. They're cheap labor. They want to learn. They love data. Lots of things we don't have time to do. They will really get down and dirty with you, so to speak. But that all kind of ties into this great resource we have, and let's protect it. Let's manage it. There's other uses for water. I mentioned that think tank earlier that you know, maybe the next thing is use it for brown water, for power plants, maybe irrigation, what levels of treatment and associated cost. There's pipeline projects being scoped to move water around. It's really a lot of energy picked up. This conference I mentioned has 600-700 attendees. The Heart Group now has a water forum before the normal Doug conferences. So that's my commercial, but back to your ESG comments. The beauty of the water midstream is you have someone aggregating water. And when you're aggregating water, you start getting that scale that maybe you want to have a large treatment plant. Maybe you have more opportunities to think about water more than the next 5 or 10 years of drilling in your particular basin, and what's the 15, 20-year plan. Now there's some natural tension there because a lot of us work for public companies and we have quarterly requirements and we can't think long term. But when I think about ESG, certainly the obvious is the recycling. So you're not pulling any more groundwater out of our earth, if you will. And of course, the avoidance of disposal. I mentioned on the economic side, we've got this nice convergence that it's becoming very attractive. Investors are now demanding more of an ESG focus. And quite frankly, we all know our industry has never enjoyed favorable opinions when it comes to environmental. So this needs to be done. Probably should have been done years ago. It's something we've always fight with perceptions. I can't remember the exact number, but I think 13 or so states produce oil, and we can do the math. The other 37 do not. And they've got different views of our industry. And we really do get caught in our little oil and gas bubble when we think all is good. But I think most people have friends or hear some of the chatter negativity about our industry. And, there's leaders now that want our industry to fail and go away. And we keep telling ourselves we're a commodity and they need us, but not everybody believes that. So I don't know if I've fully answered your question, but and then I guess the last thing to mention is when you're focused on midstream, and I saw this working at Pioneer, when you're an E&P company, priority 1 is usually oil production, and priority 2 is gas production, and priority 3 is water. And when you let someone whose total profit margin and focus and core business is handling water, they're going to spend more time and attention to it. And I'm not disparaging operators at all because they do a lot of good things. But when your priority is water, you're going to probably dot the I's and cross the T's a little bit more because you're fighting for margin and your profitability. And one or two big spills could really set you back. You have a little bit different operating philosophy. And I think that helps with the whole ESG as well. But again, it's back to proving that trust with the operators that we can take care of the water as good or better than you can, and you can focus on your core business of drilling and producing hydrocarbons.
Well, and clearly with the margins of our business going way down, you've got to be innovative and think outside the box to reduce cost or make profit in other more creative ways. And it does sound like the whole water side could achieve both of those objectives. So, Stephen, you did not disappoint. Your knowledge is clear in this, and I appreciate. For the attendees, I think Stephen is more than open to visit with any of you about your water needs or pipeline, vast amount of experience. So don't hesitate to reach out to PBPA or myself, and I'll get you in touch with Stephen. Thank you, sir, for participating. A reminder that this will be on the YouTube channel that is on the invitation, probably tomorrow. And then a reminder also that next Wednesday we have TCQ Commissioner Emily Lindley. So now we'll have kind of the other side of the environmental story from kind of Railroad Commission and operator and with Stephen. So it'll be a very fascinating topic next week as well. So with that, again, thanks to Permian Basin Petroleum Association for co-sponsoring this, and I appreciate your time. And Stephen, thank you, sir.
Yeah, and again, people, I apologize for my little cough there, but hopefully this was beneficial, and hope to hear from some of y'all.